So what we wanted to do for a few minutes is just to ask some of our panelists a reflection on the day that they spend with us. So hopefully Mike is going to join us. I was hoping of not having to do any reflection. But I must say, no, I think it's been a rich day, but I think it'd be good to hear from people who were sitting and listening as well. What are we taking from that day? So I guess we'll start with you, Paul. Last comment on the day, Mike?
Well, first of all, let me just say that you'll remember this meeting for a long time. You'll be talking about this meeting a couple years from now, because it really, to me, a seed was planted, and we actually got to see it break through the soil today. I hear you very well. And I think, oh, this one's not working? Okay. Sorry. I just said, I think you'll remember this meeting for many years to come. In a sense, a seed has been planted here, and for the maybe one of the first times it's breaking through the soil today. You really are experiencing what your future is, and there's a tremendous potential here. You know, Joanne made a comment that I often say hope is not a strategy, and it's not. But hope is an essential ingredient with a strategy to figure out what we're going to do to get us to the next place in preparedness. And so I think that from that perspective, I can just give you great credit for what you're doing here. I think one of the things that I would want to share with you, though, is do not plan for yesterday. I've heard that. Plan for tomorrow. Let me just give you a good example. I think the media panel we just had, thank you very much, it was very thoughtful. But when you look at what's happening today in how information is shared, Joe Rogan's podcast gets 12 million downloads a week. The New York Times has 11 million subscribers, which is dropping. The next level of subscription in terms of TV in the United States, Fox News gets 1.6 million viewers a day, but CNN only gets 800,000. If I add that all up, particularly the top two, that's only about 5.5% of our population gets their media coverage or their information coverage from all the venues I just mentioned. Where else are they getting it from? They're getting it from very non-traditional media. Traditional media is dead, or if slowly dying. So how do we communicate? We have to learn how to communicate in ways that we never would have imagined. Second of all, you have to understand that no one in this room will be divorced personally from a professional situation that occurs with the next pandemic, just as we weren't with COVID. How often did we make decisions that was what was in our head or versus what was in our hearts? How often were we afraid and made comments as opposed to being informed and making comments? And we have to prepare ourselves for that. You can't, it's inevitable that'll happen. And so that's not a bad thing. It's just something you need to understand. We're not disinterested. Imagine if you were a reporter covering a series of robberies in the court system and your house was one of the ones that was robbed. You'd probably have a very different viewpoint of how you covered it than if, in fact, you weren't robbed. So I think that this is a really important issue. The second thing is be careful of experts. I talked about that this morning. I heard in the panel just now, I would argue that the media was the biggest problem with experts because they ordained experts. There are people who had great sound quotes, they returned calls quickly, and they got repeatedly used over and over again, even though some of the doctors in the United States that were the experts made more mistakes than anybody I could imagine. And yet, once they were on a network or they were frequently quoted in a particular paper, often, they became the expert. So the media has to take a look and step back and say, wait a minute, how do we cover this? What constitutes an expert? If you're wrong 8 times in a row when we interview you, should we keep interviewing you? Should we keep using you? And so I think that's a really important point also, is that we have to understand how does this center become the place people go to and why? And what are the compelling reasons for traditional or non-traditional media to use you? So I think all of this is there. The final piece is, I really appreciated the whole issue and the pandemic work that's being done in terms of the legal approach to it. But don't forget, I just was at a meeting last week on the Council on Foreign Affairs. And the world today is more different from 2 years ago or before than it almost was between the post-Cold War and World War II. Things have changed that quickly. A total different model for world governance, a total different understanding of what in fact is power and what is in the facts of the day from a government standpoint. Why is that important? Because we now have to deliver on pandemic activities that is in a very different world than it was 2 years ago. Totally different. And whether we're going to have the kinds of international collaboration, cooperation, I mentioned this morning, the challenge that I see right now with supporting infectious disease work where the U.S. has cut out its international support. But at the same time, the EU is pulling back too, because in fact, they're now diverting those funds for defense. Understandably why. It's not a criticism, it's a fact. I could never have imagined that 3 years ago, 2 years ago. So I think if I leave you with anything, is chance favors the prepared mind. And right now you got to prepare your mind because God knows you're going to have a hell of a lot of different chances that are going to happen out there. And it's really important that you're prepared to understand why is this different? How might things be handled differently? Let me just give you one last point. Data. Data is my most favorite four-letter word except for love. And I was really taken aback during our pandemic with regard to kids. In the early days of the pandemic, COVID really did not hit kids at the same level it was hitting adults and older populations. 199 kids were reported dead in the United States in 2020. 199. But year 2 and year 3 changed all of that, such that a total of over 1,580 kids died of COVID in the United States, most of them in year 2 and 3. 87% were in year 2 and 3. But all the studies on schools and safety and kids were done in year 1. We never brought it up to date. We were making decisions based on basically the ancestral strain infection of 2020 on Omicron overlaid in schools that was devastating. And we kept saying, don't worry about these kids, they're okay. So also we have to be prepared to use the data, the science that we have to keep us updated, because I will promise you, another pandemic, 3 years or more, like COVID, there will be fundamental changes that will occur in the epidemiology that's there. And finally, I just want to go to the point, because I want to give you an example, I think, of how things could have been without a lot of twisting and turning. I was actually involved with the Biden-Harris transition team, as some of you know, and when the first data came out on the mRNA vaccines, both Pfizer and Moderna, everyone was ecstatic, and they should have been. 95% protection against all COVID for 2 months. But because I had worked on coronavirus infections over the previous 20 years, that term waning immunity was always swimming around in the back of my head. And so I proposed at that time, we should keep these cohorts together, the ones that were originally vaccinated as part of the study, but also basically the non-vaccinees who got placebo, but now were vaccinated, keep following them and tell the public every month we're going to report to you how well this damn vaccine is doing. And it may change over time, and we may have to give you a booster. So in fact, you're, month 1, 95, 97%. Month 2, down to 88%. Month 3, it's 76%. And we'd report that out. And then by the time we got to May of that year, we'd say, we are probably going to need to do a booster. Now imagine how differently people would have taken that. So same data, same outcome, except instead of having these major outbreaks in the summer of 2021, where people said, you lied to me. You told me I was going to be okay. Now that's maybe a mix of humility, but more importantly, it's just taking the data as far as you can and sharing that. And so there are easy fixes in some of these communication issues. We just have to be mindful of them. And I would argue today that the vaccine as we know it would have a very different feel among many if we had just simply communicated why we were going to need a booster. And the data were right there in front of us. So if I leave you with anything, I want to leave you, first of all, with great congratulations. Joanne, you're amazing what you put together here, the whole team. It's remarkable. Number two is we need you. We need you. We need voices like this. We need think tank kinds of concepts where we think about hard things, where, you know, we don't just move on from what happened, because we have a whole garden full of solutions that may come from our studying what happened. But I urge you, do not approach the future the way you've learned how to learn in the past. Accept that chaos will be the norm. Except that the fact is that we now have to understand it is no longer about communicating through the New York Times, mini podcasts, whatever. What are the new social media means? And our group is actually working on that right now, and the more we dig into it, the more confused and dark I see it. I don't know. It's crazy. Second of all, be careful of anyone who's considered an expert, okay? Anybody. And I think that we have to charge our media with doing their own homework, going back and doing their own review. Remember, I dealt with a lot of media during that time who I could never tell if they were calling me up because they were scared to death and wanted reassurance, or they actually wanted to do a story. Thinking about that conflict is normal. So thank you very much for inviting me. I really, really appreciate it. I just have to tell you, I had a major plane glitch last night, sat in the Detroit runway for 4 hours, didn't get here till 4 o'clock this morning. And the fact you kept my eyes open the whole day is a real credit to all of you. It's a real credit. I want to thank you for that.
Well, I was struck by something you said about a lack of commitment to the future. That was early in the day, but that was the touch point for virtually all the panelists, for me, in trying to make sense and to integrate each of the important perspectives that were being considered. And a real commitment to the future demands risk. And I have seen many academic initiatives fall victim to becoming risk averse. Looking for donors, you tend to become risk averse. Doing projects or helping people do PhDs that have to be feasible. And there's a kind of quieting of the risk that is expressed at the launch that just doesn't come through. Now, sitting to my right here is somebody who knows something about risk. And I know in considering this launch and this initiative, very focused on risk. But there was a book written by Lawrence Friedman, who is a military historian, British military historian. And the book's title is The Future of War, A History. And he went back and looked at who were the people who predicted best the war that was coming that actually occurred next. And he looked at military historians, he looked at generals, he looked at philosophers. You know who were the best predictors of the war that was coming? Novelists. It was the science fiction writers. And what it basically tells me when you look back over movements like this is to expand our purview to include, obviously, the scientists, the communication people, but the novelists, the musicians. Spend 2 minutes looking at Guernica, Pablo Picasso's remarkable painting when the Germans and Italians bombed the town of Guernica in the Basque Country in Spanish Civil War. That moves people to action and to understand, to build trust as much of our technical capabilities. So I often think, just in closing, of an image that came to me when I heard you mention this earlier today, of a group of researchers watching and recording the movements of a troupe of dancers, but behind a plate glass window. They can record with great fidelity every leap, every twist, every turn, but they never hear the music. I caution us that we need to think of this image as we approach the next pandemic. But I am sure that PERL and the leadership that PERL has will hear the music, dance the dance, and provide the leadership at a historical moment that when it's badly needed. So thank you.
I'm a bit speechless, which doesn't happen to me often. Well, thank you so much for those remarks. It's very touching. I'm really moved because although the topic is not celebration, that day for us was a celebration for PERL because many of us have been working for a while and then we had a little bit of delay and then we're very grateful for the school to still believing in our project. And then to bring it back to pandemic and crisis, why am I so attracted to them? I might be a little bit crazy, but I find it very humbling because you try things, you miss, and you try again. And one thing that we are at PERL and will remain is we're going to remain hungry. Hungry to do more, hungry to do more for people, for you, for our communities, and to find the right solution and to find more ideas. And we're going to continue, as you rightly said, to imagine what is unimaginable. I tried that word 5 times last night with Google. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to say a few words on people I'm thanking. I'm thanking all the panelists for today, attending all the attendees online and in person. Special acknowledgement to our donor, Marcel Lestano and his wife. I'm thanking the School of Population and Global Health, the Department of Global and Public Health, Robert, Jesse, Steph, Madhu, the PERL team, the kick-ass Miranda, Vesna, Al, Bianca, Trevor, Zida, Keith, and the incredible Prativa, the volunteers that help us to make this happen. And so just to let you know that there's a book selling still going on. Nora would be more than happy to sign book for you. There's a period of, I think it's only sparkling water and some sort of thing with few things to eat, but it's for networking. And then we will ask all the panelists to come back here in half an hour because there's going to be, we're really exaggerating, but there's going to be a meeting with our student on a private event with them. So thank you so much. And we energize, I think, for the next at least few months, if not years. Thank you so much.